I'm Lauren, and my dad works in the 1A&W Ops, and he's been in the RAF for 17 years.
Hi, my name's Aaron, and my dad works in tank plans, and he's worked there all my life.
Okay. Well, you may remember from yesterday that the focus of this interview is to talk about reading generally, and also to talk about how reading might be a useful way of keeping families in touch with each other, even families that might live in the same house, but also, and in particular, families that might at times have to cope with separation because of the nature of the work that families linked to the RAF have to do. It often means time away from home. So we're going to talk about a range of things to do with reading, and also this fantastic idea and initiative called Reading Force. So first of all, tell me about a book that you have particularly enjoyed in the last few years and why you felt you enjoyed it so much.
That would be The Hunger Games. It's a really good book, and it's full of adventure and loss as well. Lots of people get killed and then 2 people survive. It's really interesting on how they survive in the wild.
Are you able to give me a quick summary of what The Hunger Games is about and the basic storyline?
There's 12 districts, and 2 people get chosen every year to go and fight to live in the wild. And the 2 main people are Katniss and Peter, and they have to win to save their district. So they have to work in the wild for 4 days, and most of the people get killed on the first day, in the first 8 hours, and that's called the bloodbath. And then at the end, they send out dogs that eat you alive, and that's quite interesting. And when I went to see it in 3D, that really scared me because they jumped out at me. Yeah. It was really funny.
I feel really embarrassed about saying this. When I read the book, I felt quite surprised. I think it was chapter 2 or 3 when it was revealed that the main character is female. Yeah. I made the assumption that she was male. Did you make that same assumption?
No, it was quite a girly name, Katniss.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a real sign of my prejudice as a reader that I made the assumption it's going to be an action story. The main character, the lead character, is going to be male, and I hadn't read the blurb, and I hadn't seen the film. I just found it very interesting that I made that assumption as a reader. And so, tell me about what's your kind of most memorable book over the last few years, a book that you particularly enjoyed.
It would probably be the Mortal Engines series.
And tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's set in the future after the world's been nearly destroyed, and it's just really interesting. When you think it's going to run out of action, some Morse just steps in.
Fantastic. And what's the gist of the story from that novel?
That there's a girl who's trying to get revenge on someone for killing her family, and there's this boy that stops her because he thinks that the person who killed her family is his hero, but eventually he sides with her, and they hunt down him because he's on like a moving city. He's on London, but because the world's destroyed, all the cities are on wheels to mine for minerals and stuff.
Wow. Okay. Well, so 2 good answers there. Let's move the conversation on a little bit about how reading can actually be a way of bringing people closer together, because you read books alone at home, and you might read novels and non-fiction in your English lessons. How can sharing a story or sharing a novel bring people closer together?
I think it can bring people closer together because it can make a conversation longer. Say if your dad's gone to Afghanistan or the Ascension Islands, you can talk over Skype or Facebook and discuss what the book is, and then discuss about home life. So it just brings the conversation a bit longer.
I mean, because I've got no direct experience of absence from a parent, apart from now being a grown up and living away from my parents. But what's it like in those times when Dad's away, and how often do you get to speak, and what would you typically speak with him about?
It's quite worrying when they're away, but then you can talk to them through e-blueies as well as Facebook and Skype. But they do discuss with you home life, what's going on in school, and then what you're doing during your free time. Quite interesting as well. And
it's not a bad thing, but do you ever find as though the conversation becomes repetitive, or do you run out of things to talk about? You know, you've got the obvious I love yous and I miss yous and what's happening in school, but what else? You know, do you find you run out of things to say sometimes?
Yeah, definitely.
So this idea of reading force is in part about celebrating reading and improving literacy, but it's very much about keeping families in touch, keeping families talking, and giving families a reason to communicate more often and communicate about something beyond just everyday life. So do you think it would work if you and Dad, if Dad's away during the week or away on a posting, if you were reading the same book and sharing the same book, do you think it would feel a little bit silly or odd if you were talking about it in the characters and the themes? Would it feel strange?
No, not really.
Not really, because you'd have something else to talk about rather than it getting repetitive.
And you can get your different point of views on what the character's about and say, oh, I found this chapter interesting and I didn't like that chapter.
And what about finding books, though, that are going to appeal to you and to an adult? Because I think The Hunger Games is a great example. It's a book that I enjoyed as an adult, and it's a book that you enjoyed as a younger person. And are there many books like that, do you think, that would appeal to both adults and young people?
Some books and some not, like The Private Peaceful and This Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, because loads of adults love that book, and I love it as well. My mum used to read it with me as well before bed.
Right.
Before I went to my bed, went to sleep.
Yeah. What do you think about this idea of finding books that would suit adults and young people?
Yeah, I think there are a few. Because I found one which was The Lone Wolf, I think it was called. And it's like a series. It's quite interesting.
Okay. Now, would it feel silly talking to Dad on the phone or on Skype or on Twitter or on Facebook about a book that you were both reading? Would it feel silly talking about it? Would it be a bit like being in school?
No, not really, because you can get your different point of views on it and then move on to the next book in the series, if you're reading a series. And then if he reads ahead, then he can hint on the plot, what's going to happen, and it gets you thinking and you can read on.
And sometimes my experience of what it's like to be a dad, because I'm a dad now, what it's like to have a dad, is that often dads aren't the best people to talk to about emotional things and feelings and issues. Normally, stereotypically, that's mum that I would go to anyway. Do you think that dads have got it in them to be able to talk about feelings and characters in books, or have I got a very old-fashioned view of what dads are like?
They definitely do if they're a single parent. You haven't got someone else to talk to. But if your gran comes down to visit or somebody else, then you can talk to them as well as your dad. So he isn't just the one person you can talk to.
Yeah. What do you think?
I don't know. I don't really know, because both my mum and my dad like books, so you can either talk to one or the other.
Okay. And what about this idea that through being part of Reading Force, you'd actually join a wider community of young people and adults who have got a link with the forces, whether it's the Navy, the RAF, or the Army? Do you think it would be interesting to be able to share novels and to share your own experiences with a community of people who are very similar to you and have the same sorts of pressures? Would you enjoy that, do you think?
Sometimes if I do. Sometimes I might and sometimes I might not. Sometimes I like to keep myself to myself.
Yeah.
And I open up to some people who I know.
And do you think your life as the child of someone who's in the RAF, do you think that defines who you are, or do you think that's just a small part of your life and who makes you what you are? Is Dad's job something that defines who you are, or would it not make a difference what job your parents did?
It wouldn't make a difference.
Yeah, I agree with Ron.
It's quite interesting what they do, because we always discuss it in the evenings, what they've been up to. It's quite interesting to find out what they've been doing. What
about the pressures that you have as a family in terms of travel, in terms of moving, in terms of absences from each other? Do you think that's quite an extraordinary thing that you have to manage as families in the forces? Do you see yourself as having to manage struggles like that, or is it just part of life now?
It's just part of life, because it's quite interesting moving. It's exciting to know where you're going and not know.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, as she said. I've just got used to it.
And do you think it will be nice to be part of a group of people, and with Dad probably in your cases, but it could also be granddad or gran or someone else in the family who does this with you, to keep a journal of what you've been reading, to keep a log of the conversations you've had with parents or other people as part of Reading Force. Do you think it will be interesting and fun to keep a kind of a personal log of your relationship and your journey with Reading Force?
It would be interesting.
What about the competition and the prizes? You're looking forward to entering competitions?
Yeah. I told my dad about the scrapbook challenge.
Excellent.
He finds that really interesting and he wants to do it as well.
Fantastic.
He wants to join the Reading Force.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully you and all of your friends will be interested, and hopefully we can broaden it to helping not just RAF families become involved with reading together, but also the community as a whole, because reading is something that will enrich your life and broaden your horizons and experiences. And I just hope that Reading Force can not just help RAF families in Carterton, but also the community as a whole. So thanks very much for your time, and thanks for your answers.
That's all right.